Good afternoon, Chris.
Well, I don't know where you are in the world, Anthony, but I'm in Denver, Colorado. It is morning, but I'll say good morning to you. So,
Yeah,
why
but
you
we were supposed this episode was scheduled to go live yesterday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, is that why we're running a little behind?
Yeah, so there's a logistics problem that I've got to talk to our producer about.
I mean, you based on our episode today, you should be nice to that producer because we don't want to be too much of a critic. Actually, Anthony, I'm a little bit tired this morning because I went to a protest around animal testing.
Oh,
Really nervous when they don't know the answers. It just is. You got to slow down. Maybe just give them multiple choice questions, not these essay test questions. Animal testing.
That went right over my head.
Is the harshest critic you'll ever face actually living rent-free in your head? Well, 1978, psychologist Pauline Clance coined the term imposter phenomenon after discovering that 70% of successful professionals secretly believe they were frauds despite evidence of their competence. What's fascinating is these high achievers weren't actually incompetent. Their inner critics were simply louder than their accomplishments were. This psychological pattern continues to affect founders today, with many successful entrepreneurs making decisions based not on data and strategy, but on appeasing that relentless internal voice of doubt. Today, Anthony, on How to Founder, we're going to be talking about managing your inner critic. I'm Chris Franks. Today, with me, as always, is my harshest outer critic, Mr. Anthony Franco. Again, Anthony, we were joking before we came on. We don't need inner critics because we've got each other.
I had this episode complete. I thought this was about feeling you were incontinent. I thought so. I need to switch gears here. I thought I'm completely wrong.
God, that one actually did better than my animal testing. Really pretty good. Anthony, we're joined today by Mr. Scott Grace. He's an expert in nonviolent communication who blends humor, music, and practical wisdom to help people navigate internal and external conflict. He shared the stage with luminaries like Robin Williams and Deepak Chopra while teaching audiences to find common grounds with their compromising values. Scott, welcome. Apologies for the dad jokes. How do you got any good dad jokes? Any really good lame jokes for us?
I'm sure I do. They will come out in the wash.
None prepared. We actually prepare the dad jokes, which tells you exactly how bad the dad jokes
I want to hear about Robin Williams. So everybody probably asks you about that. Tell us about how you got on the stage with Robin Williams.
I used to open up for him in Marin County. He would showcase his new material at this club, and I was one of his opening acts. I met him a few times in the green room, and it was a thrill.
I can only imagine. Very cool.
I think it's a good segue into the conversation today. So you are there with, and at this point, is Robin Williams considered the legend that he is today? Is at that point he was already?
Yeah, he was. Oh yeah.
And so you're now opening for Robin Williams, and you've got to go do a tight 5 minutes, or did you get 3? What was your set?
About 15.
About 15 minutes. Okay, so you had to do 15 minutes in front of Robin Williams. How did that feel to know that you were walking onto a stage where this incredible legend was going to be the one that was right behind you?
Well, he was in the green room. I don't even know if he saw me, but my whole life has been experiments in challenging my inner critic and challenging my fears. And stand-up comedy was just scarier to me than anything. So I did it, and it felt great. I bombed once. I nailed it 7 times, and it was an experience, something to tell my kids.
It's funny because we both, Anthony and I, are big fans of Seinfeld, the show, but Seinfeld has a great bit saying most people are more afraid of public speaking than they are of death. which means
Yeah.
they'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy, which is mind-boggling to me. But yeah, it's a pretty good bit. All right,
and out of public speaking, for most people, the scariest part would be actual stand-up comedy.
Yes, 100% agree.
I would
There's
agree with
nothing
that.
worse than telling a joke in front of a crowd and it falling flat. Like that's
Yes.
I've done that.
And it has everything to do with our topic today, the inner critic.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So let's start by just helping us understand the concept, Scott. So if you're in your own words, how would you describe this voice in your head, this critic, this thing that's kind of constantly poking at you, saying, what are you doing getting on stage, Scott? Why would you do, stand-up comedy? You're a talented guy. You can go do other things. How would you describe that?
I would describe it as a protector. It's a voice that is trying to protect me from what it perceives as a harsh world. Parents who judged me, God, concepts of God as a judging God. Like if I judge myself, if I'm down on myself enough, first of all, I'll be safe. I won't take risks. Second of all, I won't feel my own shame, my own, and third of all, most important is that somehow people and God, whatever that means, will leave me alone because they'll see that I'm already my own worst critic.
It's you just hit two really, really important ideas in that statement. The first one is, I think, and Anthony, I want to ask you if this resonates with you, is there is that trying to avoid that shame, that feeling of, oh my gosh, I call it Mr. Scary, that takeover. And we can talk about the neuroscience around the amygdala takeover and the fight or flight response. Does that resonate with you, Anthony? Is it that shame response that you think the inner critic is trying to keep us from?
Yeah, it totally. So I want to hear more from Scott because this is already one of my favorite episodes, and he's only talked about 30 seconds. So I want to hear more from Scott, but it totally resonates. I have that shame protector, but somehow I muscle. Chris, you and I are the same, right? So we muscle through it, but it's still there.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, Scott, is it the people that don't have shame that don't have the inner critic, or is it the people that muscle through it? What's more normal, or is there a normal?
Whatever Anthony is, the opposite is more normal.
I'm Abby normal.
Right. Yeah. You just have to choose whatever's on the other side of that.
Well,
it's a big question, Scott.
I don't even understand the question. Okay, muscle through it means you do what you need to do despite it. Is that what you mean by muscle?
Yeah.
And then what was option number 2?
There wasn't. So I feel
no
that
shame.
I feel the shame, but there are people that just don't have that inner critic, and therefore they come off incredibly confident. Or does everybody have this inner critic?
Well, most people in this culture do, and one of the coping strategies is arrogance, meaning like I never have self-doubt. I'm, it's really like sort of a mask, and that these characters that have like unshakable self-confidence, I don't think that's the most authentic way of going about the world, but it could work. It could work for a long time, perhaps for a lifetime.
Let's start with the belief, and I think it is true, Scott, that all of us have this concept of the inner critic. And again, to your point, first thing that in kind of learning a little bit about this from the psychological perspective is it is very, very normal. And to your point, Scott, it is there to keep us safe. That critic is there to say, don't go down this ravine because there's a lion down there, and you should have a fear response when you imagine that lion. And so we've taken that with us in our evolution to get to the point today that says we want to try to avoid those shame responses. So if we start with that as the hypothesis, why is it that some people, and I think this is the heart of your question, Anthony, why is it some people genuinely get paralyzed with that fear and other people can't and can seem to move through it to a certain degree? Is it just masking or coping mechanisms, or is there other ways to deal with this inner critic?
So, well, it's not just wearing a mask. It can be that a person has been encouraged to encourage themselves. They have practice in stepping through their fears, listening to the critic, and acting anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Or feel the shame and do it anyway. That's a practice, and you can build momentum to the point where you just don't listen to the inner critic. You fire it as your guidance counselor. It may still be blah, 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 but it doesn't make your decisions for you.
I think the thing, Anthony, that always strikes me is that in our culture, founders are the people that we tend to go our own way. But the modern work culture, it seems to be a place where our inner critic can thrive. And I know it's been a long time, or it's been a while since you've kind of worked in big companies, but you've certainly been around big companies and sort of seen that toxic culture of blame. Is it a place where us as founders, we almost tend to be allergic to that, which is why we go down this path of doing our own thing?
I actually have seen something really interesting, especially in bigger companies. And I think this is related, Chris. So let me see if I can bridge this gap. I tend to put people that feel shame off. Does that make sense?
No.
So because I've practiced, to Scott's point, I've practiced this and I'm able to operate without worrying about my inner critic as much. I've been able to ignore it. People that don't ignore it, that value that inner critic deeply, think that because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this right, and I say that out loud, or I'm just going to try this and I'm fine with failing. They perceive it as either a weakness or a threat, and I tend to put people off that care deeply about their inner critic. So I think where I have culture clashes in big companies is because there's more of those people that listen to the inner critic than not. I don't know if I'm stating that correctly, but
I think I want to restate
that
that
here,
to you,
Chris.
Scott.
Yeah.
It's like, so we talked about how a lot of our culture, and we're talking about work culture, but I think you could probably find it in a lot of other areas of our culture, is places where shame and judging, and there's a lot of triggers that we face on a day in, day out basis where that inner critic can start to be pretty loud in our ears. I mean, is that true, Scott? Is that, are we living in a place where, a culture where inner critics are
it's a cultural thing. It's go back to the biblical stories, the born in original sin. It's pretty ingrained in the cultures. My favorite way of describing this is in poetry. And so I want to give you a taste of my inner critic poem. Your critic will travel with you on this earth and be your companion for worser or worse. It pretends it's your coach, your badass amigo, and it pours on the guilt. That's the beverage of ego. It's there to protect you, to help you be strong. So it has to remind you you've done it all wrong. You're weak and you're lazy and you don't have a clue. That's your drill sergeant critic trying to motivate you. Your critic wants you to be all you can be, so it gives you these pep talks all day and for free. Oh, the places you'll go and the guilt trips you'll travel as your critic plays judge and bangs down on its gavel. But you always can get some relief from your shame by projecting it onto the others you'll blame. For that is your critic at its beastiest best. It nurses its grievances close to its chest, Republicans, liberals, your parents, your ex. The world is just teeming with folks to correct. If only those fools could conform to your ways, you could get on with life without further delays.
It's first of all, it's a terrific poem. Thanks for sharing. I would love it if you've got a copy of that, if you could point us towards.
Sure.
That.
That's awesome. I want you to pull on that line. Guilt is the beverage of ego.
Yeah.
Talk more about that. That was great.
Well, the line is it pours on the guilt. It's the beverage of ego. Ego in this context is not just your sense of self, it's your neurotic sense of self. And you fuel it with guilt, with shame, with criticism, whether it be of yourself or of the world, it doesn't matter. That's what fuels this neurotic ego.
I think there's two pieces I want to ask a question just briefly, and then transition into some of that how-to stuff.
Yeah.
The first one is I really liked in the second half where you started to say, what is the effects to the outside? And so one of the things that is universally true, Scott, is that if we're feeling shame, there's typically two reactions to that. And the more common reaction is lashing out with anger, right? It is, oh, I'm feeling shame, but it's not my fault. It's your fault. And it's somebody else's fault. And so I want to get your take on that first, because I think it's a really important point where you see so many people that are angry and so many people that are pissed off in the world. And you realize just a lot of it has to do with their own stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So they're saying shame on you to avoid saying shame on me. It's just projection. And unfortunately, it's being played out in very vivid ways right now.
On very large scale. I think, so part of the question then is that shame response, that thing that we feel can feel incredibly overwhelming at times. Yeah. Let's just start to talk about how we deal with that. I mean, the first thing I would say is you probably counterintuitive here, but you actually want to pay attention to it. You want to actually see what's happening there. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is so true, because shame grows and thrives in the dark. It's like an anaerobic bacteria. It doesn't want to be revealed. So if you could say, I'm experiencing shame right now, you're halfway done with shame. It just by bringing it into honesty, and then to do some interviewing, a little inquiry. What am I ashamed about? What am I afraid might happen? What do I think this means about me? And yeah, go ahead.
Well, it just strikes me, and this is, I think, the heart of the issue that we're talking about today is in our world, being a founder where you will inevitably face failure, and you have to have this sense of self and ego to do a job where 80% of people fail, right? You are starting a task where the vast majority of people will fail on this journey. So you have to have this sense of self. You have to have a strong sense of purpose and identity, but also you will absolutely deal with failure. It feels to me, and Scott, to your point, like the darkness and the inability to talk about it and share it with your team or investors or even your family, it feels like being a founder is the place where this can play out in such really profound ways. Do you agree with that, Anthony?
Yeah, it's this weird, balance of, I think maybe truthfully, when we're talking about founders and entrepreneurs, they're more able to ignore their inner critic than others, because if you're an entrepreneur, it means you've started something. And usually the thing that shame prevents you from doing is taking that first, second, and third step. So I would say you're right, that ego is a driver. Now, ego can also be, your belief in yourself is a driver. Now that can go too far, as Scott said. It also, but there is something in our community, Chris, in this entrepreneurial community, where I put entrepreneurs in two buckets. Ones that don't share enough and ones that share way too much. And Scott, I'd love your thought on that. Like, how do you balance when you say shame grows and thrives in the dark? Yes, you want to bring it in the light and you want to talk about it, but there's also a balance of like oversharing too, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like there's a difference between sharing it with your team and sharing it with your therapist. There's appropriate ways to share it. There is, the word shame can be very triggering for people, but you could say, I have mixed feelings about this. I regret this part and da, da, da. And so there's nuances and there's street language in which you can share shame without using the word shame. There's lots of nuances with this.
All right, so let's get into some practical steps. So we started by saying, hey, let's first of all try to recognize it. Try to recognize that feeling that happens from time to time. If anybody really wants to experience that, just misspell something in the subject line of an email that you send to thousands of people. Or what was yours, Anthony? You sent one that was Snoop Dogg text?
I sent a product demo out where all the text in the product demo was Snoop Dogged. I ran it through the Snoop Dogg filter. Yeah. So I now am not ashamed of that. I kind of smile when I tell that story.
It is funny because I think Scott repurposing those mistakes becomes one of the things you can do. But tell us how we start to transform this energy. Like, so we know it's there. We know it's there. It's not inherently evil, but sometimes it can really dominate the life of a founder, particularly when things are going wrong. What are some other tactics I can start to do?
One thing I interview the inner critic and I say, are you afraid that if I don't do this right, I'm going to be, vanquished, punished? Are you afraid that if you don't, put me down, that I'm not going to be motivated, and because the inner critic is a voice of fear. And when I can get it to be more vulnerable about what it's afraid of, then I could say, I hear you. And I would like you to be my cheerleader, because when you criticize me, you discourage me. And it makes things worse. Doesn't motivate me. You remove me from my courage. And if you can start to encourage me by lifting me up, then that is your new job. That's what you can do. And I start to get that going. I do the stream of encouraging self-talk, whether I feel it or not, just to fake it till you make it. But you have to replace the critical voice with something that works for you. And you can't say to yourself, I'm not going to think about purple elephants without thinking about purple elephants. So you can't just say, oh, I'm not going to criticize myself. You have to do something in its place.
I think it's a really great point, but I want to back up for a second, which is in the day-to-day of life, and this is not just for founders, but for all of us, it's busy and we're moving and we're going and we're constantly moving from task to task. How can we notice when we're starting to behave that way? Do we look at our external behavior, or we just look at how we're feeling? I mean, because a lot of it is you have to figure out what's going on before you can try to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I do and I recommend is a practice. Like in the morning before anything, I might do some journaling, I'm a meditator. I do gratitudes and appreciations before I go to sleep. So the times when I'm not busy, I'm busy taking good care of myself. And the other thing is that when you reach for your addictions or your distractions, chances are those are moments where the inner critic has built up, and you just need a break from the self-talk. So that's one sign that you could use some self-acceptance when you're reaching for whatever you reach for.
Anthony, I want to give you a chance to react, because this is, a lot of the work in mindfulness practices. I think Scott and I probably are aligned, but I wanted to see how this is landing with you.
Yeah, I tried that positive thinking stuff, and I knew it wasn't going to work, and I was right.
You were positive.
No, I don't disagree at all with Scott. I would add an and. When I feel like the inner critic is getting a hold of me, I think of it as first principles. I love this notion of interrogate the inner critic. Why? What are you afraid of? What's going on? I love that idea. And usually for me, it comes back to because I don't have a clear idea of where I'm going. So it could be something as simple as, do I have a plan? Or do I have a to-do list that I'm knocking out? So for me, the best silencer of the inner critic is to actually accomplish something and give myself things to do that I can accomplish, and give myself a goal that I feel myself moving towards.
Yeah.
And then now I can legitimately give myself some self-praise.
Yeah. So you earn it.
I earn it.
Action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a good approach, Scott, or is it
for Anthony? It's wonderful.
I was going to say, is it deeply flawed for a deeply flawed?
It's whatever works. It's whatever works.
I do, and this is a moment where my nerdy side will come out, Scott, which is everything that you just talked about now has been backed by neuroscience and by peer-reviewed studies. And so at this stage, we know that mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a Buddhist practice, but just any mindfulness practice can actually create that space to notice when these things are happening. There's studies by Dr. Kristen Neff around self-compassion, which is incredibly, I think, important work. And then, Dr. Brene Brown, who did a lot of work around shame and shame researching, and the antidotes to that being gratitude practices, communities of faith, listening and trying to quietly interrogate your inner critic, all those things that you just said. So there is no part of this that has not been backed by some sort of studies.
I want to question the mental health of somebody that makes a career out of studying shame.
Yeah, well, you can go.
Do not take him seriously. This is he's not asking a question. He's just being silly.
So what are the other approaches, Scott? Like, what are the other things that you think that we as founders, understanding that we do live in a petri dish where failure is constant? You're constantly going in with this tug between ego and failure and self-belief and believing that you're the worst. And it's this weird environment. Those of us that have done this a while, we figured out a way through, but it is not easy for early stage founders. What other advice do you have?
See me. I'm a private coach. I surgically remove your inner critic from your brain.
That's amazing. Does it hurt?
No, because the anesthesia. So
a little bit of peyote and you're fine.
Yeah.
I would suggest going further with the interrogation. It's to get to the point where you realize that the critic has wants the best for you. And so the interrogation goes to, what do you want from me? And, I want you to succeed. I want you to have everything you want. And Great. Thank you. Thanks for being on my team. Now let's get started. I like what Anthony said. It's building a success consciousness, doing doable goals. And when you're in a lot of fear, it may be like that just getting out of bed is on your to-do list, and you check it off and you say, good job. And you build a success consciousness. You build that feel good about yourself feelings with bite-sized, doable, one step at a time action steps. And
Anthony,
it could be said, this is the very opposite.
Did we lose you? We lost you, Scott.
It's a terrific freeze frame, though.
That's great.
I'll redirect to you as we're getting Scott back, but one of the things you said, and it's just a really powerful principle, which is when you're frozen and you're really in places of fear, is
Going
you
in
can
and out.
there's he's back. But when you're frozen in places of fear, is just write something down and do that task. I find writing it down and crossing it off my list, if I've already done it, will help.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you, Chris. It could be a simple. I like what Scott said, and it's ironic you said when you're frozen. Scott's literally frozen.
Yeah.
Doing it could just be getting out of bed. That's usually not a problem for me, but just taking my shoes off and making sure I ground myself in the grass, right? Like I know I'm supposed to be doing that, so it's good for my health. So just go do something that you know is good for yourself, or that moves you in a positive direction. I think it's a great point, Scott.
Scott, it looks like we have you back. I want to ask one other question here before we can transition, and we'll do a speed round, which is, we know what we've been talking about to this point is creating that, noticing that inner critic for ourselves, noticing it and how we deal with it as founders. But there's a secondary role here, which is most of us have to be leaders. We have to be managers, and we have to lead our organization in some form or fashion. That becomes a different dynamic, because now I need to try to create, not just for me, but for my team, a culture where we embrace acceptance of failure and try to deal with all of our collective inner critics.
Mm-hmm.
Startups, you got to believe that you're going to be successful, even if the odds are not with you. Talk about that. How, as a leader, can I start to transform the ideas we just talked about and spread them across my team?
Well, first of all, the most successful college football coach, I think his name was Vince Lombardi, but I may be wrong, but he used to only show replays of the moments in a game where they did really good. And so his philosophy was focus on what you've done well. Also focus on not failure is like, it's not even a word in my vocabulary. It's what did we learn from this experience? What can we do better next time? There is no failure. There's just learning. So a leader has a responsibility to be real, but also to be bigger than their ego, bigger than their own inner critic or their own judgments, and take the whole room into account and lift people up. It's an old paradigm that you have to tear people down and point out their faults in order to build a better team.
Anthony, I just want to give you a chance. We talk in the research a lot about this concept called growth mindset. Growth mindset is this weird idea that you need to develop. But one of the core principles of growth mindset is that reframing failure as learning. And if you can do that, it's an incredibly powerful thing. But for you as a leader, Anthony, how do you do that across an organization? It's hard, I know.
Yeah, there's sometimes when you just fail. yes, you've learned something, but sometimes it's also just a failure. And saying, okay, I failed at that, I think is fine. So, and say, okay, and then going, and what did I learn from? How am I not going to repeat it? That's okay too. But so what I think is really interesting about this entire subject is that inner critic is trying to get you to avoid failing. And in reality, failing is a part of life. You're going to fail regardless of whether or not you listen to your inner critic. It's going to happen. It's just part of life. So are you going to let the inner critic control on what you do because you're scared of failure, or are you just going to embrace the fact that you're going to suck sometimes, and then you're going to learn from it and grow from it? I think it's more logical to choose the latter than the former.
Scott, chance to react to that, to tell how much Anthony just failed on that response.
I think we're saying the same things. It's just that he enjoys, using the F word. But
the real F word, right?
We're going to the same place, maybe with two different vocabularies. So no, I don't want to shame Anthony for his macho attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I'll shame him for you, Scott. So you don't need to. That's pretty good. All right, are you ready, Scott, for the speed round? Scott, is morning journaling or evening reflection more effective for managing your inner critic thoughts?
Yes.
Great answer. Better strategy: confront your inner critic directly or reframe it as well-meaning protector?
Yes, and.
I like that one as well. More damaging: the inner critic's effect on decision-making or on team leadership?
Decision-making.
Stronger influence on your inner critic: your childhood messaging or professional setbacks?
Childhood messaging.
Does naming your inner critic make it easier or harder to manage its impact?
Giving it a funny name, easier.
I call mine Mr. Scary, which is, there's a children's book, which is Mr. Scary, little blue fuzzy, Mr. Scary. Scott, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We haven't even gotten to the guitar. But we,
Are we done?
Well, we're wrapping up. So, but why don't you get the guitar as Anthony? Tell us what you've learned from this episode.
I wrote it down, but there's a bunch here. So inner critic is a protector, like a guidance counselor. I really love that framing. And ignoring it takes practice. You almost have to take it like a craft, like ignoring or not letting it rule, I should say, instead of ignoring it. Shame grows and thrives in the dark, which I think is a great framing. The thing that I was most fascinated by is this idea of interviewing the inner critic. Asking it, what are you afraid of? Why don't you encourage me instead of discourage me? And then I just wrote down, build the obvious thing: build on success. Take small steps to prove your inner critic wrong.
I'd like Scott to just be on every episode and just play gentle guitar strumming in the background as you talk about what you learned from the episode. Scott, what do you got as far as song for us? You got a little.
You give me the first line, and Anthony, you give me the second or the last line.
I'll start by saying, your inner critic is loud.
Good. And Anthony, give me a line.
I'm terrible at this. Ignoring it takes practice.
So your inner critic is loud, and it's probably saying now, what the hell is going on? Why is Scott singing a song? And it takes a lot of practice to not take it so seriously, to have it just in the background while you do what you do real well. And sometimes it will suck, but that's just life, so truck along and let yourself feel strong. The inner critic is not a friend, but it's trying hard to be one again. It's trying to protect you from this world. And if you listen and just be, you'll find yourself feeling free to be a founder of what you are here to find. Inner critic just is in your mind. So do what you do. Sometimes you fail, sometimes you won't, but do it without guilt.
I mean, I don't know that. Yeah, round of applause. This pretty remarkable episode we've got going here, Anthony. Deep dive recommendations. There's some really good ones on here. Some that I've already mentioned. Carol Dweck is the researcher who is a lot around the growth mindset. Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. I mentioned a book by Dr. Kristen Neff, Self-Compassion, the Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. Really, all the works of Dr. Brené Brown. Mindful.
The work of Todd Grace.
Todd Grace. Yeah, I haven't read a lot of Scott.
My goodness, you're missing
out.
out.
I haven't read
that's Scott's book.
That's what I mean. Like I haven't read Scott's, but I think I probably need to now.
I do.
Important. Yeah. There is a couple of good articles. Basically, all the work of Dr. Brené Brown, the articles, The Unexpected Benefits of Self-Compassion, but in Harvard Business Review by Emma Sapala, I believe is how you say it. And again, Scott, tell us where we can find your books. Tell us where we can find more information. How do we connect? I've found this conversation lovely and inspiring. So how can we connect with you?
Well, first of all, my website, scottsongs.com, SCOTTSONGS.com. As you scroll down, there's links to my books. There's something I do called song portraits, where I create custom songs for businesses, for birthdays, for eulogies, for weddings. So that's available. And coaching, I'm a life coach. It's all there on my website. It's pretty simple stuff. You just go to my website. You can find me on Facebook or YouTube or whatever.
I would also add there's any of the books by Jerry Colonna, I think, are strong in the same stuff. Scott, I think you would find a ton of crossover to the stuff you talk about, and Jerry Colonna does as well. Really incredible episode. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Really incredibly enlightening. I, for one, am going to start to put into practices more of my daily gratitude, those things that I know work, but for whatever reason, I sometimes kind of get away from. Anthony, what do we have coming up?
So we now have coming up working in versus working on the business with Greg Moore. I'm going to make it now a requirement that everybody needs to sing a song as a guest, which will probably limit our guest
we're gonna
pool.
just,
So Chris,
Scott,
you need to start
every Tuesday.
Chris,
and
do you
Thursday
play an
morning.
instrument?
I have zero talent really in any musical stuff. I love music. I've seen my wall of records.
That's not true, everybody. I've heard Chris play the kazoo. He's terrible at it, but he does play the kazoo.
No, I do know 4 chords on the guitar. That was just enough to impress my wife.
Awesome. Scott, really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Remember to visit us at howtofounder.com and just subscribe to us somewhere, one of the channels. And if you're in the good mood and you enjoyed the episode, just make sure you rate us on Apple Podcasts.